They tell you the palace is a symbol, flags and gold and 1,000 years of unbroken ceremony, the changing of the guard, the polished boots, the silence that costs men their voices and their sleep and sometimes their sanity. They tell you it stands for continuity, for the idea that England does not flinch. Nobody tells you what it costs when the symbol bleeds. Prince William was found in the East Corridor at 11:47 p.m. on a Wednesday, which matters. Because Wednesdays are the one night the rotation thins. 3 guards instead of 6. A shift change that leaves a 40-second gap near the service entrance. 40 seconds that someone had clearly counted on. He was alive. That was the mercy. That was also, in some ways, the problem, because the living ask questions, and questions need answers, and the people with answers had every reason to keep their mouths shut. Princess Charlotte found him first. She was 16 years old, barefoot on cold marble, holding her brother's hand in the dark, and when the first guard arrived, breathless, late, already calculating how badly his career had just ended, she looked up at him with the kind of calm that doesn't come from courage. It comes from fury that hasn't decided what shape to take yet. "Find who hurt my brother," she said. Not a request, not a cry, an order. And that guard, Sergeant First Class Daniel Ashworth, 12 years of service, 3 commendations, 1 divorce, 2 wars he never talked about, stood there in the corridor with the fluorescent light buzzing above him and understood, with the particular clarity of a man whose whole career is standing on a trap door, that he had just been handed the worst assignment of his life. He said, "Yes, Your Royal Highness." He meant it. This is what happened next. I keep a log. Not the official one. That goes to Commander Hale every morning in a manila folder that smells faintly of the printer room and institutional disappointment. I mean the personal one. A small green notebook I've carried since Hellmanned, the kind with the elastic strap that snaps when you open it too fast. I log things that don't fit the official version. The smell of a corridor before something goes wrong, the way a man's posture shifts when he's lying. Or small discrepancies that are either meaningless or everything, and you never know which until it's too late to do anything about them. I logged the gap in the rotation 6 weeks before it mattered. East Service Corridor, Wednesday shift, 23:42 to 23:43. No coverage. Repeatable. 3 seconds of visible dead zone from camera 7 extending to 40-plus seconds physical. I submitted it in the maintenance request column because there is no column for someone who's going to use this. Commander Hale signed the form. Nothing changed. I kept the duplicate. I keep everything. My name is Warrant Officer James Croft, and I have been assigned to the Palace Protection Detail for 4 years, 3 months, and 11 days. And on the night in question, I was on my 2nd cup of terrible vending machine coffee in the monitoring suite when the corridor alert sounded. Not the full alarm, just the soft triple beep that means a door opened without credentials. And I watched camera 7's feed freeze on a still frame like it always does when the processing cycles. 40 seconds. I was already moving before the camera came back. The East Corridor at midnight has a particular quality I've never been able to describe adequately in any official report. The lights are on a dim cycle. Energy conservation, somebody decided, as though the Crown were worried about its electricity bill. And what you get is this amber half-dark that makes everything look slightly older than it is. The portraits, the carpet runner with the worn stripe down the middle, your own hands. Everything looks like it's already been photographed for a historical record. Prince William was sitting against the wall with one knee up and his head tipped back against the wainscoting, eyes open but not quite focused. And the first thing I thought, God help me, was that he looked like a man doing a very poor impression of being unconscious. The second thing I thought was that the blood was real. Not a lot of it. The careful kind. A cut on his hairline, and something wrong with the angle of his left wrist. and the kind of stillness in a person's face that tells you they're running a calculation on whether it's safe to come back to themselves yet. I reached him at the same moment as Ashworth. Daniel Ashworth, Sergeant First Class, 12 years, face like a man who has been quietly disappointed by the world and has made a kind of peace with it, came from the north end of the corridor and arrived with his baton in his hand, but not raised, which is the correct instinct and the kind of thing that keeps incidents from becoming disasters. He looked at the prince. He looked at me. He did the arithmetic. "How long?" he said. 40 seconds minimum. Could be longer. Camera. Cycled. It does that. He said something under his breath that I won't put in the green notebook and crouched down, and that's when we both heard it. The bare feet on marble, soft and fast, coming from the family residence wing. Princess Charlotte was smaller than I expected. This is a stupid thing to notice, and I notice it anyway, because I have met her precisely twice in 4 years, both times in daylight at a formal distance, and in daylight at formal distances she is a princess. At midnight, in a dim corridor in bare feet, with her nightgown sleeves pushed up to her elbows, she was just a girl moving toward her brother, and the air around her had the particular charge of someone who has run from something and has not decided yet whether they are frightened or furious. She was furious. She crossed to William, knelt, touched his face with the practiced calm of someone who has been coached since childhood in how to present composure, and then she looked up at Ashworth and said, "Find who hurt my brother." Ashworth looked at me. I looked at the corridor. The camera at the south end had a green light. The door to the service stairs had closed. Whoever had been in this corridor 40 seconds ago was already gone into the building's skeleton, the maintenance passages, the staff routes, the geometry of a palace that was built by people who understood that power requires hidden infrastructure. "Your Royal Highness," Ashworth said, "we need to secure this corridor and—" "I know what you need to do." She stood up. She had her brother's hand. "I'm telling you what I need you to do. Those are not the same thing." A pause. "Sergeant?" She said the rank the way a general uses a private's name. Ashworth straightened. I logged it. 2351. First order given. No hesitation. She knows how this works. And the next 6 minutes were everything I have ever been trained to execute, and the chaos that lives underneath the training. Ashworth called it in on the secure channel. "Incident, East Corridor, Code 2, medical required," which is the language that means something has happened to someone important, and we are not yet calling it what it might be. I went south. The service door opened on a stairwell that smelled of cleaning product and cold stone, and something underneath that, something human and recent, the smell of a person's stress, the cortisol and fabric smell of someone who'd been waiting a long time in a small space. He'd been here a while. I went up. The stairwell connects to the second-floor utility corridor, and from there to 3 possible exits: the north receiving room, the east garden door, or the staff lift that hasn't worked properly since 2019 and makes a sound like a man clearing his throat when it operates. I stood at the junction and listened. The lift made its sound. Going down. I took the stairs at a pace that was going to end my knees by 60 and came out in the lower corridor in time to see a figure moving toward the trade entrance, compact civilian clothes over what I was already cataloging as a specific kind of posture. Shoulders set differently, weight forward. Not palace staff, not press. The way a body moves when it has been trained to move efficiently and is currently fighting the instinct to run. "Stop," I said. He didn't stop. What I know about Daniel Ashworth after 4 years on the same detail is this. He was in the rifles before the protection detail. He takes his coffee without sugar, and with the expression of a man who considers sweetness an indulgence he hasn't earned. And he has a daughter in Leeds who he calls every Sunday when he thinks no one is in earshot, and he is the only person I have ever seen defuse a formal incident complaint through sheer unremarkable steadiness. He doesn't escalate. He absorbs. He is also, as I discovered at 2357 when he appeared at the bottom of the trade entrance corridor from the opposite direction, having somehow read the building's logic faster than I had, extremely fast for a man who moves like he's in no particular hurry. He came from the left. I came from the right. The man in civilian clothes got 4 more steps and then had the specific experience of running out of options, which is a thing I have always found produces one of 2 responses in a person: fight or a very particular kind of stillness. He went still. Good instinct, actually. Ashworth had his credentials out before the man could revise his decision. "Hands," Ashworth said, and his voice had nothing in it. Not anger, not authority. Just the flat statement of a man who has already decided how this ends and is mildly curious whether the other party has reached the same conclusion. The man's hands came up. His name, as we established in the following 40 minutes in the security suite with Commander Hale going a color I have no official designation for, was Paul Renner. 34. German national. Press credential issued 3 weeks prior through a third-party media contractor that, upon examination, I had been incorporated 6 weeks before that, the timing of which I had already written in the green notebook. Credential issued 3 weeks ago. Company incorporated 6 weeks ago. Rotation gap documented 6 weeks ago. Someone was reading my maintenance requests. I didn't say that out loud. Commander Hale was doing the talking, which was appropriate, and Ashworth was standing near the door with his arms folded in a way that communicated everything necessary without communicating anything actionable. And Paul Renner was saying things in careful English about misunderstandings and press access and a story about the East Garden that nobody in this room believed. Prince William was in the medical suite. Concussion, they thought. The wrist was a sprain. He would recover. The official version would say, "Intruder apprehended. Minimal harm. A protocol effective." I would log, "Protocol effective because one sergeant read the building instead of the manual. Credential fraud requires institutional access. Who issued the contractor clearance? Who processed the form? Who signed it?" I flipped back through the notebook. Commander Hale had signed it. The same manila folder. The same printer smell. I closed the notebook and kept my face exactly where I'd put it. Ashworth caught my eye across the room. Just for a second. The way you look at someone when you're both standing in the same silence and waiting to find out which direction it falls. He looked away first. So did I. At 2:14, Princess Charlotte requested a status update through her private secretary, which is the correct formal channel and also the most 16-year-old thing I have ever witnessed in this building. The use of perfect protocol as armor. They told her the intruder was in custody. They told her Prince William was stable. And they did not tell her that the intruder's press credential had been signed by the same office that had ignored a 6-week-old security memo. She would work that out herself, I suspected. I suspected it would not take long. I went back to the monitoring suite. I poured out the cold coffee. I opened the green notebook to a fresh page and sat for a moment with the pen, and the way you do when you know you're writing something that is going to become important later and you want to get the first sentence right. I wrote, "Someone in this building wanted that corridor empty." Then I wrote, "Someone in this building knew it would be." I snapped the elastic strap. Outside, the palace hummed with its own careful silence, the kind that sounds like peace if you haven't learned to hear what lives underneath it. A flag above the east wing snapped in the October wind. Though somewhere in the building, a door closed. I kept the pen on the page. The thing about a palace is that it has too many doors, not metaphorically, literally. The floor plan I was issued when I joined the protection detail runs to 47 pages and includes a section titled Supplementary Passages, pre-Victorian, that is not to be photocopied or digitized, which means the only copy is in Commander Hale's office, locked in a filing cabinet that has a scratch above the keyhole I've been looking at for 4 years. A scratch that looks like it was made by someone who opened that cabinet in a hurry. I measured the scratch. Old. 2 years minimum from the paint oxidation, which put it roughly 18 months before I arrived, and in the period when the last warrant officer on this detail quietly resigned for reasons that were described in the handover briefing as personal and in the corridor gossip as considerably less personal than that. I had the corridor gossip in the green notebook. I had a lot of things in the green notebook by 9 o'clock the following morning because I did not sleep. And the briefing was at 7:30. And it went the way these briefings always go when something has happened that nobody wants to be precisely accountable for. Efficient, factual, stripped of inference, a sequence of events presented as though events do not have causes. Paul Renner had been transferred to Metropolitan Police custody. His press credentials were under review. An internal audit of contractor vetting procedures had been initiated. Though Commander Hale presented this in the voice of a man who has made peace with the sentence. Ashworth stood to my left with his coffee, unsweetened, expression neutral, and I watched him in my peripheral vision the way you watch a thing you're not ready to look at directly. He had not slept either. I could tell by the particular quality of his stillness, which was the stillness of someone who'd been sitting with something uncomfortable all night and had decided to carry it standing up instead. After the briefing, he found me in the equipment corridor. He said, "You logged it." It was not a question. 6 weeks ago, I said. He processed this with the expression of a man doing sums he already suspects the answer to. Did you submit it? Maintenance request column. Hale's office. A beat. The corridor had a smell I'd never cataloged before, something like old wood and something sharper underneath. Both of us standing there in the particular silence of two people who have arrived at the same door and are negotiating who opens it. You kept the copy, he said. I keep everything. He nodded slowly, the way men do when they're confirming a thing they already knew but needed said aloud. Then he said, "The princess wants to speak with the detail." I looked at him. "Officially?" I said. "Through her private secretary." A pause. At 10. Princess Charlotte at 10 in the morning in a formal sitting room was a different proposition from Princess Charlotte at midnight in a corridor, and I want to be precise about the way she was different, because the difference is the whole story. At midnight she was 16 and barefoot and furious and holding her brother's hand. At 10 in the morning she was still all of those things. She had simply put shoes on. She sat in a chair that was probably worth more than my annual salary, and she held a cup of tea she wasn't drinking, and she looked at Ashworth with the direct, unblinking attention of someone who has prepared questions and is not interested in the answers being managed. "Sergeant Ashworth," she said, "I've read the incident report. Your Royal Highness. It says the intruder was apprehended through standard patrol response." She set the tea down. "Precisely. And the kind of precision that is a form of control. That is not what happened." Ashworth said nothing, which is its own kind of answer. "You came from the opposite direction," she said. "The patrol route doesn't go through the lower maintenance corridor. Someone had to anticipate where he'd go." She looked at me. "Someone had to know the building," I said. "We followed standard." "I'm not speaking to you," she said, and looked back at Ashworth. She wasn't rude about it. That was somehow worse. What Ashworth did next I will put in the green notebook in its own section, because I have been watching trained men negotiate authority and self-preservation for 12 years, and I have not seen it done quite like this. He sat down, uninvited, in a formal sitting room, in front of a member of the royal family. He pulled a chair from its position near the wall, and sat down at a conversational distance and set his hands on his knees and said, "Lenny, the camera on East Corridor 7 cycles for 40 seconds on a Wednesday shift change. It has done it for approximately 6 weeks. Warrant Officer Croft submitted a maintenance flag. It was received and not actioned." A silence. "By whom?" she said. "That would be part of an audit. An audit Commander Hale is running." Ashworth looked at her with the expression of a man who has decided to stop performing. "Yes," he said, "that's correct." Charlotte was quiet for a long moment. Long enough that I became very aware of the sound of the room. A clock somewhere, the faint noise of a gardener's machine outside the south window, my own heartbeat being unreasonable. Then she said, "My brother has a concussion and a sprained wrist. The person who gave that man a credential is still in this building. You two know this. You are in a room with me, which means someone decided this conversation was acceptable. Which means either they think I can be managed or they think you can be." She picked up her tea again. "I'm curious which one." There is a moment in a career like mine when you understand that the job you thought you had and the job you actually have are two different buildings with the same address. I had been standing at that threshold for 6 weeks. 12 years of service, a maintenance memo, a green notebook, and a filing cabinet scratch. All pointing at a door I had been professionally trained to treat as wallpaper. Ashworth looked at me. I opened the notebook. I said, "The contractor company was incorporated 6 weeks before the credential was issued. The same week a memo about the East Corridor gap was received by the commander's office. I have the submission timestamp and the non-response record." I turned the notebook toward her. She looked at it for a long time without touching it. "That's your personal record," she said. Yes." "Not an official document." "Not yet." She looked up. Something in her face that was not quite a smile. A kind of tightening, the way a thing gets when it recognizes what it's dealing with. "How do I get a copy?" she said. What followed was 3 hours I am not going to document in sequence because sequence implies I had control of it, which I did not. There were phone calls made through channels I had not previously known existed. And there were 2 men I had never seen before who appeared in the corridor outside the sitting room and stood there with the particular quality of men who are not guards but are performing the function. There was a meeting between Charlotte's private secretary and someone from a wing of the palace that is not on my 47-page floor plan. And there was Ashworth, standing in the corridor outside all of this with his arms folded and his coffee gone cold and his face doing the thing it does when he is doing his sums. I stood beside him. "You could have kept your head down," I said. "Nobody asked you to." "She asked," he said. I thought about that. 16 years old, I said. "She asked," he said again, like that was all the math required. Commander Hale was escorted from the building at 1440 by 2 officers from a department I don't have clearance to name, and his departure was conducted with the specific quiet efficiency that this institution deploys when it needs something to happen without appearing to happen. He walked through the east courtyard with one of them on each side, and his expression was the expression of a man discovering which way a thing had always been falling. I watched from the monitoring suite. From the camera on the east corridor was cycling again. It had cycled 11 times since I sat down, which I was now logging individually out of what I recognized was a coping mechanism and did not apologize for. 11 times, 40 seconds each. 7 minutes and 20 seconds of institutional blindness, accumulated, quiet patient. Someone had counted on that patience. Someone had been counting on it for longer than 6 weeks, probably. You don't build a thing like this in 6 weeks. You find a thing like this, a gap, a man, a form that goes into a folder and doesn't come back out, and you lean on it very carefully for a very long time until it's load-bearing. I wrote, "Renner was not the operation. Renner was a test." I looked at the sentence for a long time. Then I wrote, "A test to see what this building does when the corridor goes dark." And Ashworth came to find me at 1600 with the specific energy of a man who has been given news and is in the process of deciding how he feels about it. "They want a full security audit," he said. "New rotation, new camera maintenance contract." A pause. "They're recommending a commendation." "For you," I said. "For both of us." I thought about that. "Hale's gone," I said. "He is." Which means someone knew Hale was the problem and was waiting for a reason to move on it. I looked at Ashworth. Or someone didn't know and moved when they did because the princess made them. He was quiet. Those are very different scenarios, I said. They are, he said. We stood there in the monitoring suite with the cameras cycling and the palace making its sounds around us. The distant formal routines, the somewhere clock, the flag snapping in the wind that had not stopped since last night. Which do you think? I said. Ashworth looked at the East Corridor feed. Camera 7, green light, 40-second cycle, steady as a heart. I think she knew, he said. I think she's been watching that corridor for longer than 6 weeks. He picked up his cold coffee and looked at it and put it back down. I think she needed someone to make the arrest instead of her. I opened the notebook. I wrote. She needed a witness. She needed a uniform. She needed it to be us. Then I sat with the pen on the page and thought about a 16-year-old girl, barefoot on cold marble, who had looked at a sergeant she'd probably been studying for months and said, "Find who hurt my brother," in exactly the tone of a person who already knows the answer and needs someone else to say it out loud. Not an order, a key. I closed the notebook. Outside, somewhere in the palace's bones, in the pre-Victorian passages, in the rooms that don't appear on my 47 pages, in the infrastructure of a building that had been keeping its own counsel for 1,000 years, a door opened. I didn't hear it close.